Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point AFR Talk, talking in the last segment about the fact that a homosexual worldview, John Maynard Keynes, he was into hedonism, he was into sensuality, he was into a sexually deviant lifestyle. He was thinking just of himself. He was thinking exclusively of his own generation. His economic philosophy was influenced by that short-sighted view of life, his lack of care. And see, that's the thing. You know, you have children. You care about them more than you care about yourself. You would surrender your life in a heartbeat for your children. You wouldn't even have to think about it. You'd throw yourself in front of a train if it would save your children because you love them. There's a bond there, a connection there that's by God's design that gives you this deep and abiding love for them and a concern for their welfare. If you don't have children, I'm not saying you can't be a caring individual. I'm not saying that. Don't misunderstand me. But you don't have that connection with anybody. You don't have that biological, spiritual connection with people that are your own offspring that you have created out of your love with your wife or with your husband and brought into the world and raised to maturity. You just don't have it. And then when grandchildren come along, I haven't had that pleasure yet, but Debbie and I are hoping that day will come. But, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that have grandkids, and they will talk about this indescribable love and attachment they have to their grandchildren. So that becomes then a part of the way you look at history. You realize I cannot simply be concerned about what goes on in my culture, what goes on in my nation for me, because I've got a culture that I'm going to leave behind, that my generation is going to leave behind to my children and their generation. And because I want the best for my children, I want sound public policy and economic decisions made today that will be good for them and good for my grandchildren, good for their children. And John Maynard Keynes didn't have any of that, didn't have kids, so he didn't care about any of that. He didn't care about the generational impact of his economic philosophy. And so I think it's no exaggeration to say, I'm sure this is going to get picked up by Right-Wing Watch, but it's just no exaggeration to say that a homosexual worldview is going to be responsible for the collapse of the Western economy. Now, the reason that I'm making a deal out of this is that we have to get past the point where we think that what people do in private doesn't matter. What John Maynard Keynes did in private, his private sexual life, could wind up being the thing that destroys Western civilization through his economic philosophy, which was tied to his personal system of morality. So what people do in private does, in fact, matter. It can have catastrophic consequences. We've talked about the influence of homosexuality on the creation and the growth of Nazi Germany, of the Nazi Party. It was formed by homosexuals. All of Hitler's enforcers, his stormtroopers, were homosexuals. I've got that piece by the writer on the Huffington Post, Johann Hari. He's a homosexual himself, writing on the Huffington Post. He says homosexuals have been at the root of every fascist movement. Gay fascists have been at the heart of every fascist movement for the last 3,000 years, including what he called the gay, gassing, homicidal Third Reich. He even admitted homosexuals at the root of that. They were at the base of it. And homosexuals, you said, have been at the heart and at the root of every fascist movement in 3,000 years. So it's not benign. It's not simply a benign alternative to heterosexuality. Now, speaking of impact on generations to come, let's grab clip 15. This is Ken Langone. He's the founder and CEO at Inverned Associates. He's talking with Eric Schatzker and Sarah Eisen of Bloomberg, the Bloomberg kind of press conglomerate, about the economy and profits being driven to record heights on Wall Street. And he talks about this issue, and he takes issue with Paul Krugman, who's a Keynesian, writes for the New York Times. He's a spend it now guy, tax and spend ourselves into oblivion, and trust me, it'll all come back to us. And Ken Langone says Paul Krugman is exactly wrong, that we are, in fact, stealing, and he uses that word, from the young. Let's listen.
I'm sorry, you're being polite. We are stealing from the young. We're not prospering, we're stealing. We're robbing, we're taking money out of the pockets of these young people that deserve a better future.
So he admits it. Look, this is a violation. What we're doing in our economic policy is theft. It is immoral. It is a violation of the Ten Commandments. We are taking money from people who have not even been born yet. We're robbing them blind. We're laying a burden on them that they cannot possibly be able to sustain. So I think that's a pretty significant development. You know, I understand Niall Ferguson has apologized, and that's just because the Gestapo came after him, so no big surprise there. Now, speaking of size of government, let's grab clip number 1, Rob. Number to call, by the way, if you want to join the program, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And President Obama's a big government guy. This comes right out of John Maynard Keynes. Got to have a big government, got to have more programs, got to tax more, spend more, because people trust in government rather than God. I mean, that's the bottom line. God for liberals is government. They worship a big G government. That's their idol. That's their God. That's what they think is the solution to every social problem. It's a government program. So their trust, their reliance is in government. Our reliance, our trust is in God. That's the fundamental difference between a liberal worldview and a conservative worldview. Liberals' ultimate faith is in the power of government. Conservatives' ultimate faith is in the power of God. And therefore, we want a smaller government. We recognize that government, if it gets too big, if it grows outside its proper boundaries, if it starts running outside of its proper lanes, it is a threat to our freedom and to our liberty, to our security, and to our prosperity. And Barack Obama takes direct issue with that in this clip. He's speaking at Ohio State University, and this is what he had to say yesterday about people like us who criticize the overweening, out-of-control growth of modern government.
Unfortunately, you've grown up hearing voices that incessantly warn of government as nothing more than some separate, sinister entity that's at the root of all our problems. Some of these same voices also do their best to gum up the works. They'll warn that tyranny is always lurking just around the corner. You should reject these voices, because what they suggest is that our brave and creative and unique experiment in self-rule is somehow just a sham with which we can't be trusted. We have never been a people who place all of our faith in government to solve our problems. We shouldn't want to. But we don't think the government is the source of all our problems.
Now, this is a classic case of Barack Obama setting up a straw man argument. What Barack Obama says we believe is not true. He says that we believe that government itself is nothing more than some separate, sinister entity that's at the root of all our problems. We don't believe that. We believe that out-of-control government is sinister. That's what we believe. Government itself, we understand that government has a proper role and a proper function in life, that there are things that God has designed government to do. And we believe when government discharges those functions, justice and national security primarily, it's doing what God designed it to do. We've got no bias against government because we understand that government is God's creation. So Barack Obama sets up this straw man, and he attributes to us things that we don't believe, that government itself is bad. We don't believe that. We believe that out-of-control government is bad. We believe that government that's gone beyond the restraints assigned to it by the Constitution of the United States, we believe that that's bad, that it's immoral, and that it is, in fact, tyrannical. But President Obama begs to differ. Now let's grab clip number 8, if we can, Rob. Speaking of Barack Obama, this is Cokie Roberts. She's on NPR, and there's been a lot of conversation lately about, remember Jonathan Karl telling Barack Obama at the press conference last week, do you still have the juice? Do you still have the mojo? Can you get anything done? And Barack Obama, in fact, Jeff, maybe we can play that Barack Obama response right after this. It's soundbite A6. Let's play that right after this soundbite. So here's Cokie Roberts. She's hardcore leftist. And here's what she says about Barack Obama at the beginning now of his second term.
And this question is always asked. And the truth is the president is a lame duck. The 22nd Amendment is a terrible idea. Term limits always create lame duckhood. And everybody in Congress knows they'll never run with this guy again.
So that's,
maybe I should just pack up and go home.
So that's Cokie Roberts saying that President Obama is, in fact, a lame duck. Now, she says he's a lame duck because of the 22nd Amendment, and I happen to agree with her about the 22nd Amendment. I agree with most liberals on the 22nd Amendment. A lot of liberals would like to well, they not anymore because Obama is basically sinking to the bottom of the ocean. But when he was at high tide, they wanted to repeal the 22nd Amendment so Barack Obama could run again. Now, I think the 22nd Amendment is a perfectly terrible idea. I think that if you have a Ronald Reagan and he wants to run for a third term, I would have loved to see Ronald Reagan get an extra term. And it wouldn't have made his second term. I mean, even Ronald Reagan became a lame duck in his second term because nobody has to pay any attention to a president that isn't running again, isn't going to run again. He's got no leverage. He's got no juice. He becomes just sort of a figurehead, and that happened to Ronald Reagan in his second term. And so, I would like to see presidents be able to run for as many terms as they want to, and then the American people can decide at the ballot box whether to limit the terms of presidents. Now, by the way, we have term-limited presidents. I mean, there's no reason why we can't term limit elected representatives, members of the House, members of the Senate. No reason why you can't term limit them. We can term limit the president, and we're philosophically okay with that as a people. There's absolutely no reason why we can't term limit congressmen or senators. But I personally am not a term limits guy. I'm not in favor of term limits because that's what elections are for. That's how you term limit people, is at the ballot box. And, it's like, and again, I understand the energy behind term limits, and I don't have an issue with people that press for that. Please trust me, they're not how we're on the same team. But it's like people that support term limits are saying, hey, we need government to protect us from ourselves. We can't be trusted to decide when somebody has served in public office long enough. We've got to have the government insert itself, make that decision for us. Focal Point AFR Talk, back in 2.